All right, everybody. Feel free to join in whenever you want, Jimmy Casas. Were you running? You weren't out
Fabam.
running, were you?
I just got a 2 on the Wordle, Joe. A 2.
I don't even know what that means. I don't know. It's like
In this household, when you get a 2 on a Wordle, it is called a fabam.
A fabam? That's not even a word. That's like culturized. It's not even a word. All right. So
Joe,
welcome to the weekly show.
Joe, you know how I love making up words, buddy.
I told you, I think your new book should have been reculturized. That's what I would have done if I was you, but I'm not you. So you got to do what you got to do. I got my things going all over the place.
I'll do me. But you watch. Do you ever play the Wordle, Joe? Do you do the Wordle, Joe?
No, man, I'm not smart enough for that stuff. I'm just still trying to do. I took a bunch of kindergarten math sheets home over the weekend just to do those, just to make sure I can keep my mind sharp. I'm pretty good at those. Being that, I'm good. I'm getting really good at those.
All right. So if there's
start the baseline, you got to start the baseline.
People in the studio do not share what the word is for today, but let's see. Do you play the Wordle? And would you like to know what fabam means? Because if you want to know what fabam means, I bet you'll use it. Fabam, Joe, is right in that moment where you're really, really frustrated and just so upset. And then all of a sudden you put your word in and you nail it and it goes from fabam. There you go.
All right. Okay. All right. I like
there
that.
You go.
Actually,
add it. Google it. I bet fabam comes up now because I've been using it. So
no, it's not. It's not. It won't. And don't even try to believe that it will. So it's good. How are you doing, boss? You doing good?
I'm doing really good, buddy. You know what I'm super jazzed about this week? Every week. This week I'm super jazzed because on Thursday, Joe, I'm going to be speaking at the Principal of the Year Gala in Washington, D.C. And I am super jazzed about that. So 10 years. It's a 10-year reunion, Joe. 10-year reunion. Okay. Can you believe that? 2012. My God, goodness. I am
freaking old.
Time. So I'll be there. I know. So I'll be there. So I'm super excited about that because, for people to get recognized like that at that level, Principal of the Year, AP Principal of the Year, for their state, for all of them, 100 of them to be in Washington, D.C., to love on them a little bit, and to have a really nice dinner, a nice award banquet, to celebrate them over the course of 3 days. I am super, super jazzed about that.
Good for you. Good for you. That'll be fantastic. You'll have a great time. That'll be a great time. I'll be out. He's talking to people. I'll be in Maine on that day. So
I'll be in Maine. I'll be in Maine Wednesday.
Really?
Yes, really. Are you?
So all right. Yeah.
We'll talk later. Sorry, guys. We'll talk later. Anyway, we're on the weekly show this morning with Jimmy and Joe talking about leadership because we always talk about leadership because we know that it's always about leadership, Joe.
Yeah, it's a fantastic. We appreciate everybody being here today and talk about what we can do to make sure that we not only amplify the voice of those around us, but give ourselves a chance to see some great things and really invest in the leadership roles that we take on and what we can do to help each other out along the way, because this job gets to be really lonely. And when it gets lonely, it gets depressing. And then when it gets depressing, you start to think, man, it's probably better somewhere else. And you go somewhere else and it's the same thing, right? Because we haven't built capacity to lead in terms of the work that we do. And I just find myself on a daily basis feeling so lucky to be in a spot where the people around me in particular are incredible leaders. And there are days that I know that they don't feel that way because there's so many things coming at them. But if they could just take a step back and realize the impact of the work that they do and the people that they serve, I think they'd feel better about it. And it's the same thing that happens in our classrooms too. The way that our teachers and our staff members go about making sure that every kid has a chance has been phenomenal, especially in a situation where, there's so much extra stuff that goes along with the work that we do. And I've been so proud of them. I continue to be so proud of them. And it's happening across schools all over the country, but I don't think we take a step back to realize that. And I think if we can put ourselves in a situation where we can grow the leadership capacity of those around us, then there's a better chance for them to see the work that they do and for us to not feel like it's all dependent on one person. So looking forward to what that really looks like, in the future. And I think the thing that I was thinking about this week, Jimmy, honestly, when it comes down to the work that happens is how are we creating a network of people that we can lean on? So I had a chance this week to lead the district administration's Aspiring Superintendent Academy. So it's a 9-session academy. If anybody is in a principal or a central office looking to get into the superintendency, it's a great program. And so we cap the program at 25 people, and we have 9 sessions, and 3 are on site somewhere across the country, and then the 6 are virtual. And it's literally just diving into everything from leadership to board governance to connections with board, connection to the community, to connection to contract talks, interviews, all of the stuff that you would need to get into the superintendency and be successful in it. And the reason I tell you that is because they've got this group of 25 people. And yesterday was the last day of the series of 9. And it was like we were sitting in there at the end and nobody really wanted to take off. And we've only been together for literally 9 sessions. But at the same time, they've created this group of people with common interests and common purpose. And when you find people with common interests and common purpose that want you to do well and want others to do well, then you're going to find yourself wanting to come back and have more belief in the work that you do. And that's what I felt all week. You know, we've had, again, this is the 9th session, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. And being online for literally 8 hours a day for 3 hours or for 3 days in a row is hard. I mean, really hard. And I walked out exhausted after every day, but exhausted and enthused because I was mentally exhausted in terms of the conversations, but I was so jacked up that we're creating this network and we've got all this stuff going out there. And I hope they had a wonderful experience. But at the same time, even if the content doesn't, all resonate with them, what they've done is they've created a network of people that when they walk out of that spot, they're going to have, people that they can ask questions to. And it was asked probably like 3 or 4 times before we got out. Before we got out, everybody, like 3 or 4 times it was mentioned. Don't forget to fill out the Google form with your email and your phone number, because we're going to have a group text. We're going to have a chat that makes sure that we keep everybody connected. And like there was like 2 other people that said, hey, don't forget that thing. Don't forget to, add a form. Where's the form? I got to make sure that I have the right stuff in the form. So, they want these networks, and this is a lonely job. Like you are the only person in your district with your particular job title or in your building with your particular job title. And that gets lonely. So how are we creating a network of people that you can have real conversations with? So when times get tough, you have somebody, but on the other side, when things are going well, you want to have somebody to talk to too.
Joe, I love that. And you and I both know that you and I are both in a couple of networks. And the reason I love those networks is because, for the audience, if you don't know this, Joe just makes fun of everybody in those networks.
That's not true. I make fun of you in all those networks. There's a difference for that, Jimmy. And don't do something dumb that you don't think I'm going to make fun of. Like, you can't make up words and put them on a book and think I'm not going to make fun of it.
Yesterday, I was doing a virtual session. My phone was blowing up because Joe Sanfilippo.
That's not true. That's not true at all.
You know what I love about our group, though, and this is true. It's a humbling group. It will keep you humble.
It absolutely will. But awesome. and give you suggestions.
And right. It's always
and
fun,
they have people. You have people.
What's that, buddy?
I was just going to say, and we'll knock each other down. But at the same time, if I need to call you and say, hey, I'm really struggling, then I'm going to call you. The other side is true too. If I do something, I'm like, man, I crushed it today. This was amazing. Like, this is our group did this. Our group did that. I feel good about this. I can say that to you, and you're not going to knock that down, because in that moment, that's what I need. And I think that's what happens. If we have people that are willing to do that, then you're going to put yourself in the right spot. So, all right, we got people watching today, Jimmy, or is it just us?
It looks like Frank Poland says, hey, yep, that's right. Frank's already questioning my word. Frank, you play Wordle, I promise you there will be a Fabam moment. You watch. Just play Wordle. Jim Wichman, yeah, shout out to Benjamin. Congratulations, yes, for making the Iowa Blue Ribbon School winner. Jim, that is not how I remember it. I'm going to call false on that. I think the visitors, my brother and I think it's the other way around. We took your money, because if I remember, I don't even think I saw you most of the day, Jim. I think you were in the woods or in the water swimming for golf balls. That's what I recall. So, but anyway, having said it, that is not true. I'm sure there was a lot of back and forth, and let's be honest, we all suck at this age of golf. But having said that, but there are a lot of parallels, right, though, Joe? I was just thinking about what you're talking about, those networks. So for the people that are audience today, what are the networks you're creating, and maybe how are you being intentional to helping others create those networks, right? So
Right.
look at the parallels again. Joe's talking about aspiring superintendents. We could say the same thing for aspiring principals or principals that are currently in the role, also for teachers at the same time. And it's a reminder, Joe, to, we always say this, right? Like when you become a superintendent, I'm sure this happened to you, Joe, probably even more so, honestly. And I know it happens at the principal level, and I know it happens at the teacher level is, we get that job offer, we're super jazzed, we're excited, we can't wait to get started. They hand us the keys, and now what?
Right.
Now what, right? How are we intentional of giving people our time to create and surround them with that network to ensure their success? Because remember, when we hire people, right, we saw something in them, their potential, they wanted to be great, we were excited for them. And then all of a sudden, we look back 2 years later, 3 years later, we want a new superintendent. We need a different principal. This teacher needs to go. Well, what happened? What happened there? Because we just hired them. And I think it's a great reminder for all of us that we have to be really intentional for those that we hire. And Joe, you and I just talked a little bit about this before we started today, but about this onboarding process. How are we onboarding process? How are we creating this network for people? How are we setting them up for success? And what's the parallel between how we do that for our employees? And quite frankly, how do we do that for our families? And how do we do that for our kids? How do we build this community of network for everybody? Because that's what community means to me, right? That you have a network of people that you can depend on, that you can count on, that are in their time of need, and also that you can support and you can help as well. And so there are so many parallels between that. I think that's awesome that you're doing that. And that's a great reminder for all of us that we need our own networks, but how are we creating networks for other people in our organizations too as leaders? So
that's a great point.
A thought on that, you want to share that in the thread this morning, or if you want to jump into the studio and join us and share your thoughts and some of the things that you might do, we would appreciate that as well, right? So let's learn from each other. How are we networking, providing network opportunities for other people? How are we building that community? And how are we making those transitions for our students and our staff? So awesome that we create this culture where everybody wants to be a part of it and everyone wants to be there. So
I think one of the things that's important to us is you have a formal mentoring program set up, or you have a formal program that takes everybody through the nuts and bolts of what everything looks like. But there's also a secondary mentorship that happens, and it's often with the people that they're surrounded with when they come into the building. And I don't know if you can regulate what that looks like, but at the same time, if you can give everybody the tools, because people are going to gravitate towards certain people. That's just what it is. If they have a similar interest, if they have a similar grade level, if they have a similar department, if they have a similar, if their kids are in the same, grade, and that's a connection there. Whatever the connection is, we tend to gravitate towards people who have similar interests at us, or something that we can kind of move forward together that give us that comfort level of discussion. And then those often become mentors. Become mentors for each other. And that happens with new teachers and new staff members a lot. And, if the intentionality doesn't go away with that piece too, if we can make sure that we're not only providing the formal mentorship, but also, if we know that people are connected to other people in the district, how are we providing more space for them to talk, or more resources for them, or whatever the case may be? And that's a place that I think I struggle with myself. We have a phenomenal mentoring program in terms of everything that make sure that people are connected to other people from a formal standpoint, and that's. And I don't have anything to do with that. Val Herman is a middle school teacher, and she runs that, and she's phenomenal, without hesitation, phenomenal. But what the other piece is important too, like who are they going to connect to outside of those formal mentoring meetings? And what do we do to make sure that those continue to happen and connections continue to be made, but also that they can spread out so their network can grow, and it's not just one person in their department that they see all the time. How do we get them to other places in the building so they can connect and grow, and they know their impact has an impact on somebody else? And if we believe that the work that we do has an impact not only immediately on the people that we serve in the moment, but on other people in the space, we're more likely to keep that going because we can see the impact on a greater scale.
Yeah, I was just thinking a couple things as you were talking there. I want to go back to what you had said earlier, that it's funny, right? When you first came together with this network of people, sometimes that could be a little awkward because it almost seems a little forced. There's a little bit of figure out people, who they are, and trying to figure out their personalities, and are they sincere, and are they genuine, are they real, all these things we try to figure out. And that's just natural, right, when you connect with people in that first moment. But it's really awesome that when you see the evolution at the end, when people don't want to leave, right, when they don't want to lose that connection, and you've done something right. And it reminded me of, I don't think we've talked about this before, but I know that we've shared the importance of, it's kind of funny, how we do these student exchanges, right? And the importance of maybe even considering doing teacher exchanges as well. I remember doing those, and I remember those first connections and going on site onto a campus with teachers and then meeting other teachers for the very first time. And it's a little awkward, and you go out for dinner and we're just kind of trying to figure each other out. And then they go spend some time together, 2 days together, hanging out, learning, spending time, sharing ideas, observing each other, right? Complete strangers initially. And then by the time we leave, everybody's taking selfies. Nobody wants to leave. Everybody's giving hugs. Everybody's exchanging numbers. And it's just a reminder, again, the importance of connections, right? And as we begin to think about how we transition people again into these networks and into our communities, into our schools, again, it's really important to remember, it's not that Joe and I profess to have these answers, people. Part of our job is we're just trying to get you to reflect, to think about these things. And if there are some potential, ideas and suggestions that people can make, make those, put them in the thread, jump on the show, whatever, because we know every one of you is doing these things. And we need those ideas, right? Because after a while, you just kind of run out of ideas. And part of our job is to kind of keep pushing the thinking on that a little bit. So here's one thing I want you to think about as well is I have a little bit of a soft spot, Joe, to be honest with you, for instructional coaches. I still remember the state of Iowa doing the leadership component for teacher leadership in Iowa. It was a great idea. I loved it. I think it was one of those things where everybody could get behind it, right? How do we amplify, as you said before, but how do we continue to grow and develop our own people into leadership, right? There was a need for that. And so we started the teacher leadership program in Iowa. It was awesome. And so part of that was trying to develop what would that look like. And so there were instructional coaches for the first time that were money was supporting that and giving it to the state, to schools for funding. There were curriculum specialists. There was all these types of things that teachers could go into leadership positions and roles, right? And as I begin to think about that, I look at where we're at today, and almost every school in every district has some sort of literacy coach, math coach, instructional coach, curriculum, whatever. Again, I know there's exceptions, but there are many of those that exist in many schools. But yet every time I feel like we go into schools to work with schools, some of the most isolated people now are those instructional coaches, right? Whether they be math, literacy, science, whatever they are, right? However they're defined. And so that's one thing I want our leaders to think about today is how are we supporting our instructional strategists, coaches, et cetera? And how are we supporting them in their transition? And here's how I see it. So number one is so I'll call these 3 C's. I'll just make this up. What's the connection? In other words, how are we connecting these people to other people in the building, right? And again, there's that networking you're talking about. How are we being really intentional to say to the instructional coach, hey, one of the things we want you to do is we want to make sure that you're just making connections, right? In your first 45 days on the job. I want you to get into every classroom. I just want you to meet people, get a feel for the classroom, greet the people, start making connections. Because we know that the success of instructional coaches is going to be based on that relationship, right? People are not going to let you into the classroom if they don't trust you, right? It's going to be a little awkward. People are going to question. Some people are going to hesitate. So connections are powerful. Once again, as always, relationship focused. Number 2, what's the communication? What was the communication from the leader of the organization? In this case would be the building. What was the communication to the rest of the staff in terms of what the role and responsibility of the instructional coach is? It's not the instructional coach's responsibility to go and tell people what their role and responsibility is. That's our job, to set them up for success. Do not put them in that awkward position. They are not bosses and supervisors. They are colleagues. And it's our job to be very clear in our communication what the role and responsibility of this. So for example, my expectation as the principal is that our instructional coach will be coming to your classroom in the initial part of the year to simply build relationships, to make connections, right? We know that we want you to feel like you can reach out, that you know that that one role of the instructional coach is not to go and to spy on you. It is not to go into your classroom and come to me and say, hey, this teacher isn't doing X, Y, Z. So I think that communication is really important. And then the third C would be, to me, is it's about establishing competencies, right? How are the instructional coaches supporting building the competencies, in other words, the skill sets and attributes of those, what we call effective instructional strategies, right? Even something as simple of a framework like that, the intentionality of how we connect, network, communicate, and I think that is part of a transition that I see as a gap. I don't see that happening. When I talk to instructional coaches, they're sharing with me, I didn't get a lot of guidance. I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. There are teachers who don't want me to go into their classrooms, right? And quite frankly, when we get down to the bottom of it, there are classrooms that they don't feel comfortable going into it because they don't feel well received. They don't feel comfortable. And quite frankly, eventually what happens is some instructional coaches will start ignoring some teachers because they don't have a relationship. They'll spend a lot of time in other classrooms, and now we create this undercurrent of favoritism, and now we create a division in our culture. And that is why transitions of employees is so important, because we have to help set them up for success.
I couldn't agree more. And we had, it reminds me that exactly what you just talked about in terms of setting them up for success and putting them in the right position. I know I failed miserably when we tried to do that here years ago, absolutely miserably, because we didn't know, I knew there was a need, but I knew there was a need. It didn't come from the group in terms of what we were trying to get done. So it was harder to put people out or put people in that position. And then the people who wanted more coaching and more help got that attention. The people that didn't get it, that didn't want it, didn't get it. And those who probably needed it didn't get it because we didn't want to identify anybody as the perception of being in need. So it was a disaster, and it's my fault because I didn't set it up the way that it was supposed to be set up. And I think going back, if doing it all again, we start to look at what is the need for everybody. Then what are the need for specific groups? And then most importantly, what's the need for that person in that role to be successful moving forward? And how can we help that person have an identified role in terms of what it's supposed to look like? Here's the job description. Here's what we want out of it, right? Here's what everybody's expecting of you, and here's what you're expecting of them, and everything that goes along with it. And I just know that I failed miserably on when we put that in place years ago. And it was a 100% on the administrator, 100%. And I think that's just a lesson that it was not good, and it was my fault. And so if we can put ourselves in a spot that helps, at the same time, I can't go back and think, oh my gosh, I can never do this again because I really screwed it up the last time, which a lot of times happens with leaders. They're like, well, I'm not doing that again because I screwed it up so bad. Figure out a different way to do it and move it forward.
Yeah. What I love about that, Joe, and the truth of the matter is, the real truth is we all screwed it up, right? And that's part of it, right? And it maybe wasn't that. And if it wasn't that, it was something else, right? And that's part of the growth. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things about being a school leader, a campus leader, district leader, whatever that role is there's just so much scrutiny on people, right? And this is where I just feel the angst for our people, right? And this is where we have to get to a place like, where are we going to understand that people are doing the best they can? Like, if they knew how to do it better, do you think they potentially went in there, watch me just screw this up, right? That people aren't doing that. And so it's a reminder to us when it happens to us, right? It's a reminder for us to make sure we're not doing that to other people, right? People do the best they can. It's the growth in it. And that's the hard part about being leaders, because we are so vulnerable. There aren't a lot of passes in this day and age. There's so much scrutiny. We're all one comment away, or one word away, or one sentence away from kind of getting canceled maybe a little bit. I think that causes people to hesitate, right? It causes people not to put themselves out there. Like, are you kidding me? Why am I going to do that? But what I love about that, Joe, is that we learn from that, we reflect on that, and that's why it's important. I think that sometimes we just have to slow down. So think about this from a practical sense. Let's just say there's a fire drill in your building today, okay? Let's say there's an incident in your building involving an upset parent. Let's say that today was the day we were going to start testing our 8th graders. I'm just making these up. It doesn't matter what the event or situation is. I believe that it's really important when these situations occur and they're over, or these events occur and they're over. Hell, I don't care if it's graduation, whatever the event is. I think one of the mistakes we make, and see if you've ever gotten caught in this trap, because I'm just reflecting on my own behavior now, is that I still remember a year later coming back when it's the time to do that event again, or we find ourselves in that situation again. We're trying to remember what we said we were going to do differently, right? What was that thing we talked about? Remember last year, Joe, when we did that one situation? What do you talk about? No, I don't remember that, right? Or we just forget it again, and now we're doing it again. Right. That's why I think we have to slow down. And I think effective leaders bring people back together after a situation or event and say, okay, let's debrief. Slow down. Let's debrief. What's our takeaway from that? Because to me, that's the teaching and learning moment. And if we don't do it in the moment, we'll forget it 6 months, a year later, and we'll be right back in the same situation. But I think what happens after the events, we just go back to normal life and we don't regroup to debrief and say, what are our takeaways? Let's get these down. So one suggestion I would make to leaders is, I didn't do this obviously in my first part of my career, but certainly did it in I'm going to say my last 10 years or so, is we would have a specific notebook that every time we had an event, we'd come together, we'd debrief, we put notes in there. And these are the things that we knew in the moment we didn't have time to address. We didn't have time to deal with this or go into the weeds on this today. But this was always our summer binder. And we'd look at our summer binder and we'd go back through everything. We'd already debrief. We had the notes, and then we'd split up the work. And then we'd say, hey, we've got a couple months for every one of us to do our part to make sure we go back and make these corrections, make these adjustments, make sure in our notes that are going to be communicated when we go do the event again this year. Remind our staff to kick off the year when this incident happens. Here's a couple reminders that have better results because we have better practices. And so I think the summer binder like that, because there will be moments in the year you don't have time to get into the weeds on some of this stuff. You just don't. And that's okay. You don't need to, because the event isn't going to happen until next year again. But you have to get back to it at some point. So again, there's maybe a thought, something to kind of consider. And maybe, again, some people already do that. I'm looking at the comments here.
I think Jim's got something up there that I want to talk about, because I think it's important. I think that we miss it a lot when he talks about great leaders model vulnerability. And I think that what ends up happening with us it transitions from what you're talking about in terms of getting away from stuff. A lot of times when you get far enough away from stuff, then when you reflect on it, you reflect on the things that worked well, or the things that just a certain piece of it, as opposed to the other things. And a lot of times we don't talk about the things that don't go well because we don't want to be seen as failures. And this happens with us in conversations a lot, because we're not vulnerable with the group that we serve, because we don't want to be seen as weak or uninformed or wrong, because we're the leader and we're supposed to have the answers. And being vulnerable doesn't mean that you're weak. It actually means that you're strong. I think it means that you're strong because you're willing to tell somebody that you screwed it up. And guess what happens when you do that? When you're willing to tell somebody, now, if you screw everything up and you don't follow up and fix it, that's a different conversation. But when you say to somebody, I'm sorry, that's on me, this is what I'm going to do to fix that moving forward, it does two things. It provides the opportunity for the people that you serve to see you as real. Because if you always have to be right, you can never be real. That's the first thing. But the second thing that it does is it allows those people to know that they can be real with you too. Because if you never talk about things that you screw up, why would they talk about things that they screwed up? Right? So you're not modeling what it looks like to reevaluate what it, when things don't go well. And if you can model what that looks like, I screwed this up, I'm sorry, this is what I was thinking, I was wrong in thinking that, or this was the information that I have, and base that decision on, now with the new information that I have, or that we have, we're going to do it differently, and it's going to look like this moving forward. At least you have that train of thought and some and process in place, that when they do something that doesn't go well, they're more willing to talk about the fact that it didn't go well, as opposed to figure out a way to defend something else, right? Or honestly, just make it up and say it went better than it did, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Joe. Absolutely. I agree with you. Jim Wishman says to keep preaching. I guess he wants to hear more from you, Joe. Keep preaching. I got, hey, Joe, take a look at Christy's question.
Great. Okay, so yeah, so here's the thing that when I look at this, the piece that I could, and if you keep it up there for a second, just so I can read. So the thing that comes up a lot when I think about this is it's the same mentality with principals. It's the same mentality with district leaders. When people don't know what you do, they make up what you do, and then you get disconnected from the work. And if you figure out a way to connect them to different pieces of the organization, there's a better chance for that work to move forward. So what I would do is I would think about the needs at each level. If you ask, how do you integrate when they're more experienced in primary education and we need them at secondary level too? What I would say is that you're not going to have all the experience that you need in terms of, if you're a primary teacher, connecting to the primary building is easier than connecting to the secondary building. But can you provide resources that help the secondary teachers, that's helped somebody at the secondary level? It doesn't always have to be you. You don't always have to be seen as the expert. You can be seen as the connector. And if you're seen as the connector to people at different levels, now you create more opportunity for yourself, and you also create more opportunity for them in knowing, because they know it. I tell people when they start their position, I tell them, don't pretend like you know everything, because you don't, and they know you don't know everything. So when you pretend to know everything, then they're going to call you out because you don't know everything. But if you can connect them to people who do, now you've created momentum. You've created a network, just like we started the whole conversation. You create the network, and you create more opportunity for not only the person at the secondary level, but also for the person that is outside of the network that you've now brought into the network to move them forward.
Awesome. Christy, I'll share a couple thoughts for you as well. Thank you, Joe. And Joe is spot on. I love what he just said. You know, one of the things is, unfortunately, because we're now got the title of instructional coaches, there's a perception we know everything about instruction. The truth of the matter is we don't, right? So we go in, and coaching really is about asking questions, and it's about being a learner first. And that's what I'm taking from Joe there. Be a learner first is what I'd say. But here's some practical steps I just wrote down very quickly as I saw the question. Number one is, so let's imagine you are a district, and now you a district employee, or you're seen as a district instructional coach, and you have to go into different buildings, right? But your experience is primary and you have to go into secondary. Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I would suggest is, number one, is make an initial connection, which means take the initiative on your own to reach out to the building leader of that level and meet with them. Say, hey, I'd love to come meet with you. I want to talk to you. I'm going to be coming into your buildings, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit, just about to get some information and see if we can talk about what that transition might look like, right? So it's almost like you're seeking permission, right? You're going to the building, you're going into someone's domain. Make an initial conversation with that principal to get a little bit of feel. What do they expect? What is your role going to be? So that would be the second thing, is to get some clarity of expectations. What does the building principal expect of you, right? And what are some things that you might need some help with, right? So right away, we're building this relationship. We're making these connections. We're communicating. So we're both on the same page. That's really important. What will it look like? How often will you come in? Do you need to sign in? I mean, all these different things. Do you need to let the principal know you're coming? Are there any initiatives you're working on that I could support? Whatever that conversation looks like, you're just trying to bring clarity as what value are you going to bring to the organization, and how can they help you do that? Number three, maybe ask the principal at that time, could you help me? Would it be possible to come to a meeting, a faculty meeting, for you to introduce me, right? And for you to share some of that, and then I can share some thoughts on as well. And here's what I would say, but the bottom line is that there's some sort of formal introduction to the whole staff, because it's almost like you're just going to be a part of that staff. We want to create that sense of belonging to you, so you don't look like an outsider when you come in. And the last thing I'd say on that is partner with the people in the organization. Find those people, identify those people, ask for help to identify those people. But if I'm an elementary background and I'm going into secondary, I'm going to start connecting with those department chairs. I'm going to start connecting with the veteran teachers and saying, hey, I'm a primary person, right? That's my background. But I still know some things about instruction. But what I don't know very well is, I'll be honest, I don't really know the curriculum. I don't know what the sequence looks like, right? I don't know what the vertical articulation between, how do you guys do it between 9th and 10th, or 10th, 11th, and so forth. So again, a lot of this to me is taking that initiative. Don't wait for it. You go lead, because that's what leaders do, right? And again, as Joe said, I would just say, ask a lot of questions and remember to be a learner.
And you don't have to be the expert in the area. You do have to be the person that can help them on some level. And a lot of times that's connecting them to somebody who provides you with more momentum, and it doesn't make them feel like you're going to come in and just, tell them what you think and move on with it. When you ask the right questions and you connect them to people that can help them, now you create credibility for the work that you do, And all of a sudden now, 6 months later, 8 months later, they might start asking you more questions, because they know that you're going to go out and help them find the answers, as opposed to, just telling them what you think. Right. So I think it starts with a bunch of questions and a bunch of conversations about what they're looking for, regardless of area. If your particular area is at one level and you're going into another level, asking the questions and seeing what they need, what they want out of that, and then getting a win early, making sure that something happens early to provide momentum for you. If that's providing the resource, if that's asking the question, if it's getting into the classroom so they know and understand what it feels like and celebrating the great work that they're already doing, now you've got some momentum for the next time that you want to talk to them.
Christy, thank you so much for the question. Hopefully there was something in there that helped you. If not, well, the weekly show is probably going to come to an end. So having said that, thank you so much, Joe. It's been a great morning again. Guess what, buddy? It is going to be 75 degrees today here, and it's already toasty. I'm loving it. It's November. The only sad part, global warming might really be happening right now. But
I thought you said the only sad part was that Iowa was going to be playing football today.
Yeah, well, that too. We know that. And even worse, the Packers are going to play tomorrow. Oh,
listen. That's not a conversation that we're having right now. We're going to talk about it later. They're just in a little bit of a dip here. Just a little bit of a dip. It's going to be fine. Jimmy, it's going to be fine. I've got it. I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to make it. It's going to be okay. I got this. Don't worry about it. I'll fix it.
Well, I'm going to be vulnerable right now. I'm going to be vulnerable and just say we're in trouble, right? So, Christy, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody else.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you for your kind comments. God bless you. Have a great weekend. Hopefully, we'll see you next week on the weekly show with Jimmy and Joe. God bless everybody. Thank you.